As you grow in your private practice, one of the things you're going to figure out that you need is a good electronic health record system. And in particular, if you're going to be on insurance panels, and even if you're private pay, having a good electronic health record system that has scheduling built in with it and patient billing and all of those features are something that are important to have. Therapy Notes is the premier electronic health record system for mental health providers. They're who I use in my practice, and I rely on them every day in working with clients and keeping accurate records, and also with the billing of insurance and also billing of clients in the practice. So go check them out today, therapynotes.com. And if you'll use the coupon code GORDON, GORDON, you can get 2 months free. So go check them out today. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 73 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm Gordon Brewer, and I'm so glad you've joined me for this episode. If this is the first time for you to listen to the podcast, welcome, and I'm so glad you found us, and I hope you'll keep coming back and subscribe to the podcast in whatever podcast catcher you use, whether it be iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify, iHeartRadio, several others. Getting it out there, and our audience is growing every day, and so I am so grateful to you for that. Today's episode, I'm going to take a little bit of a turn. I'm going to maybe talk about some things that a little bit about my things going on in my personal life and just how it all relates to private practice. Normally in this podcast, I really try to draw on experts in the field, whether they be clinical experts or they be people that are experts in business or in private practice. And hopefully, as you've gotten to know me, you'll know that one of the things that is real important for me is to provide you with some good resources and some good stuff that's beneficial to you in your practice, or just in, as I like to call it, your private practice journey. So I'm glad you're here with me for this episode. I'm going to be talking a little bit more here in a minute just about gratitude and drawing on supports and the reason for that. And part of it is I'm going to be just talking a little bit about my personal story and some things that are going on for me personally here. I tend to be a little bit of a private person, but I'm also learning that it's helpful to reach out to others. And I'm always reminded of Brené Brown in her book, Daring Greatly, and the importance of being vulnerable. So we'll get to that here in just a minute. One of the things I want to remind you about is the Money Matters course. Been hearing me talk a lot about that, and it's still in the pre-launch phase, at least depending on when you're listening to this. Just a few more weeks of that, and then it's going to go up in price. So right now you can get it at half price, and there's probably the majority of the content's already up there for you to start learning from. The format is, I'm using a platform called Teachable, and there are videos along with written lessons that you can follow and go at your own pace. Right now, there's probably close to 4 or 5 hours of material there. So it's a pretty comprehensive course. And the course is really designed to help you learn about the financial side of private practice. It's something we don't really learn in our clinical training, is how to handle the business side, in particular the financial side, about what to charge clients, about how to manage the books, so how to deal with taxes and just all of those kinds of things that are involved in running a private practice, which is really a business. And so you've got to get that right in order to be successful. And so many people can fail in their practices because they're not prepared financially. So that's what this course is designed to do, is to give you that information and teach you about all that, all those things we didn't learn in graduate school. Anyway, take a look at that, practiceoftherapy.com/finance course, and use the coupon code TAKE50, just TAKE 50, and you can get the course at half off. And once you enroll in the course, you get to use it whenever you want to. So it's kind of like a lifetime membership. So go take a look at that. The other thing I wanted to mention, and you've heard me mention this here recently, is we've got Killing It Camp coming up in October. And I've been real excited about that and looking forward to getting out to Estes Park, Colorado, and going to be out there with Joe Sanok and a bunch of other private practice consultants, and then probably over 200 other private practitioners, people in private practice that are there to learn how to grow their practices and really thrive in private practice. So you can go check that out over at killingitcamp.com. I think it's going to be one of the premier conferences for private practice, those of us in private practice this year. And I'm excited to be there. I'm going to be one of the presenters there and be talking about how to use G Suite to manage your practice better, the tools of Google G Suite. So got that coming up. So, well, let me switch gears here now and talk with you a little bit about what has been going on in my life and just how that relates to private practice and what I'm doing here at the Practice of Therapy. Again, this is a little bit different episode, maybe not quite as long, but hopefully this will be helpful for you. The reason that most of us go into private practice, at least one of the big reasons that I think most people switch from maybe working for an agency or working for somebody else, is to really get in a place where they can be more independent with their schedule and being able to work when they want to, and really also be their own boss. And I know that is the big reason that I moved into private practice, back in around 2006 when I first began delving into private practice. As I've shared with many of you, I really started private practice part-time while I was still working for an agency back at that time. And really the turns of life really kind of helped motivate me to move more fully into full-time private practice. My daughter was getting ready to start high school at the time, and she was really active in the band, and I knew that I wanted to be able to participate in like going on band trips and being that, that consummate band parent, just involved in all of that sort of thing. And I knew that if I continued working for the agency, I wouldn't have the flexibility for that. And just also some things going on in my personal life. My wife had, around that time, and I guess it was just the way the stars aligned. My wife developed breast cancer, and thank goodness she's a survivor of that. And so life got really complicated. And so I really wanted to free up the time to be able to deal with all of those things and be able to have the freedom to go into private practice. The thing though is that when you go into private practice and you're working for yourself, you also really need to keep in mind that it's important to continue to keep a safety net. When you're working for someone else, typically the way it goes is you build up sick time or personal time that you can take off. And and they still pay you for that, that time off, vacation time and such. But when you go into private practice, you don't necessarily have that luxury. So it's important to build those reserves, financial reserves, in order to be able to take that time off. The other thing too that I've learned and has really created a good buffer for me and my practice is by when I started a group practice. I was no longer having to depend on just my time with clients to bring in income. And so that's one of the things to think about as you grow your practice is creating diversifying your income so that you're not solely dependent on just simply trading your time for money. You're sitting in the therapy chair and being in front of clients is how most of us make our money in this particular business or this particular practice. So think about that. I think it's always important to look for different ways to bring in other streams of income so that when you do need to take time off, you do need to take time away, you've got that buffer and you've got the money doesn't just dry up, which just can create a lot of anxiety for folks. I mentioned earlier that I've had a lot of changes in my personal life here recently. And one of the things that I shared in earlier episodes about my dad, just with that whole aging process and him getting dementia and our family really having to rally to try to figure out about his care and helping my mom out in dealing with him. Well, as life has and as life turns, I've had one more thing to come up for me this past week. My wife, who I mentioned earlier, is a breast cancer survivor. She's also had a few metastases from that since she first developed breast cancer. She's had a brain tumor. She's had to have full brain radiation and all of that. And I don't say all that for sympathy or pity or anything like that, but one of the things that it has taught me about life is you have to be flexible, and you have to be, and we tell this to our clients all the time, you have to be able to kind of roll with the punches and deal with what life hands you. Well, this past week, my wife, bless her heart, she fell and she had broke her ankle. And so it has just left her completely incapacitated. And just with the other complications of the stuff with, the other things, fortunately now, knock on wood, she is cancer free and she has just beat the odds with the cancer stuff. But then this break happened. She broke her ankle. She was going back into the house and missed her step on our front steps and fell. And so she is in rehab right now, trying to work on getting her strength back and kind of getting back on track with things. But, the one thing that I have really been thinking about this week is as I realign what I'm doing and realign my life is the importance of, number one, is being able to practice gratitude. My friend Sybil Smith, who was on an earlier episode of this podcast, and she's also a colleague of mine here in town. She is in private practice. She has the Journey for Healing Arts in a neighboring town. And Sybil and I get together for coffee every so often and just talk about our practices and what's going on in our lives and all that we go through as practitioners. But Sybil shared a quote today on Facebook that really just struck a chord for me. And the quote is, "Gratitude is the capacity to stare doubt, loss, chaos, and despair right in the eye and say, 'I'm still here.'" And that quote's by a person by the name of Diana Butler Bass, who I have had the pleasure of meeting at one time. Anyway, I think that is something that we have to always do. It's something that we talk with our clients about, and we talk with we hear people's stories and the troubles that they're going through. But I think a lot of times for us as therapists, it's very easy to be so busy taking care of others that we forget our self-care. So I think practicing gratitude is a big part of that. At least that's a big part of it for me in my own life, and being able to just navigate all the ups and downs that life hands us. The other thing too is, one of the things that I've been guilty of in the past is trying to do too much on my own, trying to do it all. And the truth of the matter is we can't do it all, and we have to draw on supports. And so one of the things that I'm most grateful for is not only my staff here in my practice at Kingsport Counseling Associates and the support they've showed me as I'm going through all this stuff with my dad and my wife, but also the close friends and neighbors and our church friends and all of that have just been huge supports for us as we move through this transitional part of life and being able to do those things. And I think that, and going back to what I said earlier, I think you really have to build in those things in your practice, because guess what, folks? Life is going to happen, and we're going to run into those things where we're going to have to change gears and change horses in the middle of the stream, as they call it, and be able to deal with what life hands us. And so I think the more we can be proactive about those things, and the more that we can prepare for what life hands us, it's just going to help us along the way. The other thing too is being able to take time to recharge your battery. I think, again, something that we probably say to our clients all the time is, what are you doing about self-care in terms of getting enough sleep, being able to eat like we should, to be able to get exercise, and to try to stay active outside our offices. I know for me, one of the things that I've been guilty of is not exercising enough. And, our jobs require us sitting all day. And so I think building in those things that can help us get active and be out there outside and doing all those things that we know will help us in our own self-care are just so important to remember as we move through this journey, because what we do as therapists is hard work. It can be emotionally draining. It can also be very fulfilling at the same time. But just want to remind you to do that for yourself, is look at your self-care, look at what you need to do in order to, as I like to call it, recharge your battery. I think the other thing that is important to remember is that when life gets overwhelming, that's a reminder, at least to me. And again, this is something I talk with my clients about and have to apply to myself, is really learning to slow things down when life gets overwhelming and when things are really feeling piled on. One of the best habits that I've developed lately is spending time each morning, after I get up and kind of go through my little morning routine and get my coffee, and I sit down and I get out my planner and I start writing down and reflecting on what has happened in the past and the last few days, and then also planning for the day. And I think if we take 10 to 15 minutes every day and plan out our day, it makes things much less overwhelming. And I've gone full circle with my planner. I was doing something on my phone, and then was also, using different electronic stuff. But I've gone back to just using regular old paper and pencil, or paper and pen with my planner. I've mentioned this before, and I'll try to remember to put a link we'll put a link in the show notes to this particular planner. It's called the Full Focus Planner, and it's something that Michael Hyatt produces. It's a little on the pricey side, but one of the things that it does is it helps me stay focused with the task at hand. And if we break things down into smaller pieces, I think it just helps us in being able to not feel so overwhelmed. One of the metaphors that I use with clients a lot is, especially those clients that we get that their life just, they tell us their life story, and you just think, oh my gosh, that's just too much. It's just so overwhelming. But the metaphor I like to use is to tell people to imagine having a garage and opening the garage door, and the garage is just filled from ceiling to floor with stuff, and it's just cluttered, and it's stuff that's just kind of piled up over the years, and you've been handed the task of cleaning out the garage, of taking care of all the stuff there. And what I say is you've got to start somewhere, and probably what you would do is just simply break it down into smaller pieces. You would just start in one corner, and you'd pull those things out, and you'd look at them, and you would decide, okay, is this something that I need to keep or throw away or hand off to somebody else? And that's what we need to do in our lives every now and then. I was just thinking with my wife's difficulties, I'm probably going to have to be looking at getting into a home that's more accessible. And so when I think about that, that's pretty overwhelming. But one of the things that I know I can do and we'll be able to do with the help of supports is be able to downsize and declutter and get prepared to move. I've dreaded this. I've dreaded this coming for a long time, but I knew that it would be here. So, but anyway, breaking it down into smaller pieces when things get overwhelming is just to be able to just do it one bite at a time. Another metaphor I like to use. It's not I don't know if it's a great metaphor or not. It's really a little bit gross, but anyway, the question is how do you eat an elephant? And the answer, of course, is one bite at a time. Not that anybody would want to eat an elephant. I like elephants, but not as a meal. But anyway, those are some things that been on my mind this week, in particular with all that's going on in my personal life. And I just wanted to share that with you all out there. I know that what you do is meaningful work, or you wouldn't be doing it. I know that the whole reason I've gone into this field and went into private practice, the bottom line is we want to help people, and we want to be able to help themselves and help them in their lives, and teach people how to help themselves as well. And so I think a lot of times we need to kind of back up and really be grateful for what we have and the gifts we've been given. And I think that makes us not be so overwhelmed with what life hands us, of really looking at, the glass as half full rather than half empty. So I'm leaving you all with those thoughts today. Sorry, hopefully this hasn't been too far off track for you, but one of the things that I hope to be able to do through this podcast is not only provide valuable resources, but also give a lot of encouragement for those of you out there doing this noble work of being counselors and therapists and social workers and psychologists and just mental health providers, or really anyone in a helping field. It is noble work, and I'm glad to be a part of your life and being with you on your journey and you joining me in mine. So thanks for this listening to this today, folks. I hope that you have a good rest of your week and a good rest of the weekend whenever you might be listening to this. So take care, folks, and blessings to you. Well, folks, thanks again for joining me in this this episode of the podcast and my departure from kind of the normal type of episodes from what I normally do. And thanks for listening to me just talk about those things that have been on my mind this week. I invite you again to go check out our sponsor for today's episode, Therapy Notes, and you can find them at therapynotes.com. And if you'll use the coupon code Gordon, GORDON, you can get 2 months free when you purchase that service, that electronic health record system. They're really good. I really like using them in my own practice. And also, just a reminder, check out the Money Matters course. You can still take advantage of this pre-launch period. And if you'll go over to practiceoftherapy.com/finance course, you can find that there, and use the coupon code TAKE50, TAKE50, and take advantage of the pre-launch half off. And so I commend that to you. And then finally, Killing It Camp, just killingitcamp.com. It's going to be a wonderful conference. I'm looking forward to being out there with a bunch of folks, and it is going to be a blast, I do believe. So take care, folks. And again, thank you for listening to the podcast, and thank you for letting me into your ears and into your lives and joining me in this journey. Take care, folks. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.